The sky over Portland, Oregon, was a heavy gray, like a worn blanket draped over the city's quiet streets. Eleanor Price stood in her kitchen, clutching a cold coffee mug. The two-story wooden house, with its pale blue walls and large windows overlooking a small garden, felt unnaturally still. Her husband, Thomas, had died 5 days ago in a car accident on Highway 26, a head-on collision with a delivery truck. The police said he didn't suffer. Eleanor wasn't sure if that was meant to comfort her or just fill the silence. She hadn't slept properly since. The house, once filled with Thomas's deep laughter and the clatter of his toolbox as he tinkered with something broken, now echoed with absence. Eleanor, 56, moved through the rooms like a ghost, her auburn hair pulled into a loose bun, her hazel eyes dulled by grief. Their daughter, Lila, 28, had flown in from Chicago, sleeping in her old bedroom upstairs. But even her presence couldn't fill the void. Eleanor traced her fingers along the counter, stopping at a chip in the granite where Thomas had dropped a cast-iron skillet years ago. They'd laughed then, promising to fix it someday. They never did. The funeral was tomorrow. Eleanor had chosen everything carefully: a simple oak casket, white roses, Thomas's favorite, and a playlist of jazz standards he used to hum while shaving. She'd ironed her black dress, polished her shoes, and written a eulogy she wasn't sure she could deliver. Grief wasn't new to her. She'd lost her mother a decade ago. But this was different. It wasn't just Thomas's absence. It was the unraveling of a life she thought she understood. That night, unable to sleep, Eleanor wandered into Thomas's study. His desk was cluttered with invoices from his carpentry business, a half-finished crossword, and a worn leather journal she'd never seen him use. She hesitated, then opened it. The pages were filled with his neat, slanted handwriting, lists of projects, grocery reminders, and then, on the last page, a single line. "Tell Eleanor about Rosie. She deserves the truth." Her heart stuttered. Rosie? The name meant nothing to her. A client? A coworker? She closed the journal, her hands trembling, and told herself it was nothing. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and it would grow. The funeral home smelled of polished wood and lilies, a scent that made Eleanor's stomach turn. She stood by the casket, her hands clasped tightly to keep them from shaking. Lila stood beside her, her face pale but composed, greeting mourners with a practiced nod. Friends, neighbors, and Thomas's clients filled the room, their voices a low hum of condolences. He was a good man, they said. Always fixing things, Eleanor nodded, her smile automatic, her mind elsewhere. Then she saw her, a woman in her 30s, slipping through the crowd. She wore a navy coat and carried a small boy, maybe 2 years old, on her hip. No black dress, no somber expression, just a quiet determination in her steps. The boy had dark curls and wide, curious eyes. The woman didn't pause at the guest book or linger by the pews. She walked straight to Eleanor. "Eleanor Price?" Her voice was soft but steady, with a faint southern accent. Eleanor nodded, confused. The woman adjusted the boy in her arms. "I'm Sarah. This is Henry. He's Thomas's son." The words landed like a stone in still water, rippling through Eleanor's chest. She blinked, her mouth dry. "I'm sorry to come here like this," Sarah continued, "but I didn't know how else to find you. Henry deserves to know his family." Eleanor's knees buckled. Lila caught her arm, her eyes wide with shock. "What are you talking about?" Lila demanded, her voice sharp. Sarah didn't flinch. She handed Eleanor a folded piece of paper, a birth certificate. Henry Thomas Price. Father, Thomas Edward Price. Mother, Sarah Marie Coleman. The date of birth was just over 2 years ago. Eleanor's vision blurred. She looked at the boy, at his dark curls, his familiar jawline. Thomas's jawline. The room seemed to close in. Whispers spread among the mourners, but Eleanor barely noticed. Sarah spoke again. "I'm not here to cause pain. Thomas was gone before I could figure out how to do this right. Henry's all I have, and I'm not well." She touched her scarf, and Eleanor noticed the thinness of her frame, the faint shadows under her eyes. "I needed you to know." Lila pulled Eleanor away, her voice low and furious. "Who is she, Mom? Did you know?" Eleanor shook her head, unable to speak. The rest of the funeral passed in a haze. She delivered the eulogy, her voice mechanical, and stood by as they lowered Thomas's casket into the ground. But her mind was on Henry, on Sarah, on a truth she hadn't been ready to face. In the weeks after the funeral, Eleanor's life felt like a house with a leaking roof. Every day, a new drip of realization. She didn't tell anyone about Sarah or Henry, not even Lila, who was back in Chicago, throwing herself into work to avoid her own grief. Eleanor needed answers first. She started small, combing through Thomas's things for clues. His toolbox, his emails, his old phone. Nothing stood out until she found a key tucked inside a coat pocket, labeled Storage Unit 47, River Road. The storage unit was a cold, concrete space filled with woodworking tools, old furniture, and a locked metal box. Inside, Eleanor found bank statements for an account she didn't know existed, deposits to a woman named Sarah Coleman, and a single photo. Thomas holding a newborn, smiling in a way Eleanor hadn't seen in years. Her chest tightened. She sat on the cold floor, the photo in her hands, and let herself feel the betrayal. She remembered the signs she'd ignored. Thomas's late nights, blamed on client projects. His new cologne, sharper than the one she'd bought him for years. The way he'd stopped reaching for her hand at dinner. She'd told herself it was just marriage settling into routine, but now she saw it for what it was. A slow drift into a life she hadn't been invited to share. Eleanor drove to a coffee shop to meet Sarah, who'd left her number on the birth certificate. Sarah looked frailer now, her hands trembling as she sipped tea. She explained she'd met Thomas 3 years ago at a community center where he volunteered fixing furniture for low-income families. Their affair was brief, but Henry was the result. Sarah had stage 3 breast cancer, diagnosed during her pregnancy. Thomas had paid for her treatments, kept her secret, and promised to tell Eleanor someday. He never did. "I didn't want to hurt you," Sarah said, her eyes on Henry, who played with a toy car on the table. "But I'm running out of time. Henry needs someone." Eleanor didn't respond. She looked at the boy, at his small hands, and felt a pull she couldn't name. She left the coffee shop with no promises, just a weight she wasn't ready to carry. Eleanor spent weeks wrestling with the truth. She could walk away, let Sarah figure it out, let Henry become someone else's responsibility. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw his face. Thomas's face, but softer, innocent. She started preparing quietly, as if testing the idea. She researched guardianship laws, cleared out the guest room, and bought a toddler bed. She told herself it was just planning, not commitment. Lila came home for Thanksgiving, and Eleanor couldn't keep the secret any longer. Over dinner, she slid the birth certificate across the table. Lila read it, her face crumpling. "He did this to you? To us?" she whispered. Eleanor nodded, bracing for anger, but Lila just cried, her head in her hands. "Why are you even considering this, Mom? You don't owe him anything." "It's not about Thomas," Eleanor said. "It's about Henry. He's a child, Lila. He didn't choose this." Lila didn't understand, not yet, but she didn't leave. She stayed the weekend, asking questions, listening, softening. Sarah's health worsened. She called one night, her voice barely a whisper. "I signed the papers. Henry's yours if you want him." Eleanor drove to Sarah's apartment the next day. It was small, cluttered with medical bills and children's books. Henry ran to her, offering a sticky piece of toast. Eleanor laughed, surprising herself. She took him home that night, his small hand in hers, and the house felt different. Less like a tomb, more like a beginning. Months later, Eleanor's life was unrecognizable. Henry's laughter filled the house, his toys scattered across the living room. She was 56, waking up to 6 a.m. cartoons and sippy cups, but she felt alive in a way she hadn't in years. Lila started visiting more, bringing books for Henry, teaching him to say her name. She was still angry at Thomas, but she was trying, for Eleanor, for Henry. One evening, Eleanor found a letter in Thomas's old toolbox, tucked beneath a plane. "Eleanor, I was a coward. Henry was a mistake I don't regret, but I regret hurting you. If you're reading this, I hope you can find a way to forgive me, not for me, but for you. You're the strongest person I know." Eleanor folded the letter and set it aside. Forgiveness wasn't there yet, but she didn't need it to move forward. She sat on the porch with Henry, watching the stars emerge over Portland's skyline. The grief was still there, a quiet companion, but it no longer defined her. She had chosen Henry, chosen herself, and in doing so, rebuilt a life from the ashes of betrayal. It wasn't perfect, but it was hers.